Hi, my name's Mulan. Sorry if my voice is kind of weird. I'm kind of sick right now. I am refuting Joseph's speech about music having a positive effect on human development. So his main claim was that engaging in playing in music has a positive effect on human development, and his secondary claim was that engaging in playing music develops our personal growth and with emotional intelligence. His second claim was engaging in music develops social bonds between groups of people. His third was engaging in music develops intellectual growth and cognitive development. So I'll be focusing on the first 2 points because I actually agree with the third point, that it develops intellectual growth with cognitive development, because there's a lot of evidence for that one. But for his first two, he's very broad on music. Like music, there's different genres of music, so what type of music is he talking about for his genres? So when I looked at his outline, he had on his bibliography that he was talking about like classical music, but he didn't address that to the class, so we can't automatically assume that that's what he's talking about. So since he didn't give us that source of information, I felt like he was lacking on that part. And so I feel like his evidence was like only substantial for his portion that he was talking about, because since he was so broad, he was able to talk about anything. But according to Nylon, people who frequently listen to sad or aggressive music are more likely to experience higher levels of anxiety than those tuned into happier selections of music. So like I know like most people when they're sad, they listen to sad music. And do you usually feel happy after you listen to your sad music? Like, yeah, usually you don't. So like usually like start thinking like, man, these lyrics, I feel them, and then you start getting more sad about what you're trying to get happy over. And then another thing was a study conducted by Prevention Research Center at the Pacific Institute for Research Evaluation found that listening to rap and rock music positively predicted aggressive behavior. So I listen to rock, so like I don't feel like all rock music, but you know, like I believe technically around like the 50s that like they thought that like 50s, 60s area, like that they thought if you listen to rock, like, oh, you're a devil worshiper and all this stuff. But like I feel like that's mostly where that context comes from. But like from the study that they said like rock music and rap music, because if you listen to the lyrics most of the time, like they're not always good. And then like also participant for the sad, happy music and everything, participants were in a study were required to listen to happy, sad, or fearful sounding music in order to test their neural activity. And then they compared it and found out that these people that listened to this sad music or depressing music were more likely to have anxiety and depression. So going back to my earlier point that you don't feel happier after you listen to that sad music. So like I felt like he should have been more specific on what type of music to listen to. On his other point, he said that there are multiple ways like that in music develop social bonds between groups of people, and like I don't completely agree with that. Like yeah, like the first thing I thought of when he said that was, oh, if I go to a party, I'm dancing next to people, we're all connecting through the music, we're all dancing and everything. But like, are you really like connecting to those people just because you're listening to the same song and you're all dancing to that music? And so like there are multiple ways to develop these social bonds that don't revolve around music. Like according to Dr. Troyer, people could do like art, like artistic stuff, like basically anything in art or like anything in STEM, like just when you're working together as a group, like those are other ways to create bonds with people. Like it doesn't have to specifically be through music. And like when people like with these social bonds, they're less likely to get dementia, like to develop dementia when they're older. And like I felt like he didn't really give information on like how they help you, like how it helps you develop cognitively. So I felt like adding that on my part was informational more, because when he talked about it, we don't really know like what's good for us if we listen to music. We don't know what is changing in our bodies or how our neural responses are to it. Also, Troyer also said that people who connect with others generally perform better on tests of memory and other cognitive skills. Joseph didn't tell us, like I said before, didn't tell us what good did it do for us listening to music. Like I could go and be in my room listening to music and just be sitting there and I don't get any health benefits whatsoever. It's just me listening to music, just like how we just sit down and watch TV. It's just another activity that people do in their daily lives. So going back to like me saying that like I don't agree with fully what he said, even though some parts on the last one that engaging in music develops intellectual growth and cognitive development. But other than that, like on his other points, I didn't fully agree with what he said because he was too broad and lacking in information. So going back to that, I feel like music does not always have a positive effect on human development. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry you had to speak through the sniffles the whole time that you're doing it, but you'll be glad to have that out of the way and put those points in your back pocket. The proposition is identified. There's a layout of what the supporting structure is that's pretty good. You basically say that your dispute is not going to concern the third point. I don't know if you came in time to hear the earlier argument. We had a similar argument on similar issues, and basically they made the almost exact same position that you did. Look, this is widely accepted. There's a huge consensus on this. There's not any dispute here. So let's talk about the things where there is controversy. And I think that's a reasonable point to make. You don't want to spend time trying to deny something that is real. And that's especially true when we get to these debates. On the first point, I thought that you had a pretty good challenge to the way the advocate used their evidence because they don't identify whether there's a particular genre of music that's involved in the research that they're citing. And you have some examples of other kinds of music where the consequences might not be as positive. You mentioned depression and sadness early on, and you had one study there. Then you came back to the issue again a little bit later on with a different study talking about the same sort of thing. I think it probably could have come earlier at the same time that you had that first point. The lyrics, I think, on the rock music and the rap music, I thought that was an interesting idea that there could be negative connotations or consequences. People get aggressive or they have some kind of irritation or they are unsettled in some way as a consequence of engaging in that sort of music. And that one of the things you want to do is a little bit of contrast here. So he says it's going to have these, broad benefits to it, but none of that's quantified, none of it's explained, none of it's measurable. So when you make your argument, I think you should be pointing out that says, look, I recognize that none of my arguments are quantifiable or measurable, but guess what? Neither is the advocate's argument. So when I present information that says that it can create aggression or provoke sadness or have a negative consequence, well, I recognize that that's a little hypothetical, but it's not any more hypothetical than the arguments that the advocate presented because there wasn't that kind of detail. And then you can maybe refer back to some of the evidence that the advocate used to show that point. On the second point, I liked your explanation that you kind of challenged the idea that it's related to the music, and it might just be the fact that they are participating in something together, and that that's the source of the benefit that goes on there. I think, you had one piece of evidence that talked about other art that has this kind of impact and even doing STEM kinds of processes. The issue of dementia came up. I guess that was an argument that the advocate presented, and this would be another one of those things where you basically put out a challenge that asks a question. There's nothing wrong with asking the question, but a question doesn't make an argument. And so you want to make the claim, and the claim here is simply, that is not explained. There is no measurable impact. As far as you can tell, there's no explanation of what the delay in dementia would be, what the improvement in memory would be, what the clarity is. So suggesting that there is a connection and a benefit is, it's so vague as to mean almost nothing. So you got to take the idea that you've got and turn it into a claim, you're kind of dancing around it and dancing around it. Yeah, we're doing something together to be socially beneficial with each other here. And so, like I said, I think that you did a pretty good job suggesting that other activities could have some of the same health benefits. Although sitting around watching TV, I'm not exactly sure that one was very convincing. Okay, thank you.